Welcome everybody to Kingdom Talks. We want to wow, I'm already blown away because we just came sliding in sideways, as Bralynn likes to say, and didn't get to do a sound check. So if anybody's out there, let us know if you actually can hear this just fine, or if there's an echo. So Bralynn, thanks for being on. Chris, thank you for being on. And I have Steve Hamtpon here with me in person, and we're sitting here in Paris at a nice little restaurant doing our frequency thing.
All right. Is that frequency water as well on the grinder board?
I'm sure it is.
All right. Very good.
So,
well, Chris, I missed you.
Missed you too. Where have you been?
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, hey, what we want to do today is Steve has not really heard Chris talk about the cosmic shift. So I thought it'd be a good time to go back into it again because we have been doing the panels. We went all the way from coast to coast, and we're asking people, leaders, and everybody what they think is one of the most exciting things about moving into this next age, and what are some of the concerns about it. But what we didn't talk about is, well, what is the next age? I mean, a lot of people are feeling this spiritual shift, but Chris, you've brought something to the table that you've been sharing for the last few years that actually shows that it's not just a spiritual thing, but it's something that is actually in nature that we can see and that God put in the stars for us. So I don't know how much you want to share or where you want to start from.
Well, that's quite a blank page you've given me.
Yeah.
So, well, how about we start with this? Like, what better time of the year to talk about anything dealing with the stars than Christmas? Because I mean, this is like the Magi, right? This is that time of the year where you've got the Magi following the star, and so you have this great story about how if you're just looking at the heavens, that that's God's clock,
Yeah.
and He can sort of tell us, what He's up to and where we are in the story of God and man. Important things, like where are we in this story right now?
Yeah.
So, that was, for me, a good confirmation. I spent some time exploring the heavens and the spirit, years ago, and ended up being taught about what the Bible calls the Mazzaroth, which is, the world knows that as the zodiac, right? The 12 constellations that the sun moves through in the course of the year. And in the really short version of this, those 12 constellations, that Mazzaroth circle is like God's clock, and it tells time just like our radial clocks have like an hour hand and a minute hand and a second hand, So the clock has like a minute hand, if you will, and that's like the sun moving through each sign once a month. But it kind of has like a really slow hour hand, and it actually moves in the opposite direction the minute hand does, to just make things more fun, I guess. And that really slow hour hand is something called the precession of the equinoxes. And if you just Google or YouTube precession of the equinoxes, you'll get some fun graphics about what's going on to make this motion in the sky work. But in a nutshell, it's this. On the spring equinox, the sun doesn't always rise in the same place, which you'd think it would, right? It's going through all 12 constellations in a year, so you'd think every spring it would be back in the same one. But it sort of starts to regress backwards the normal way it would move through the constellations, and that was this precession, backwards motion of the equinoxes. And so every ancient culture, whether that was Hebrew or any other culture, really marked the spring equinox as an important day because it's like the beginning of a new year. And it just so happened that as they're observing this, that they see that it's going to move, from one sign to the next. The equinox will be in one whole new sign about every 2,100 years. And this is just astronomically speaking. This is just the numbers astronomically.
Yeah.
And so, the math they could do, and it was observable. I mean, like, you could actually observe it over the course of one human lifespan. You could be passing it down to the next sky watcher. I mean, really what they were. I mean, today we would call them astrologers, but I can't say that word because everybody would freak out, But, you got to think of like astrologers, thousands of years ago. That's the scientists of today.
Yeah.
So whatever else you think about them, I mean, Daniel was like the chief astrologer in Babylon. And it's not like he worshiped the stars, he worshiped God. So he was looking at it from the right perspective. As a fun aside, it's kind of widely believed that the Magi that knew that, the star of Bethlehem, all that kind of stuff, that was Daniel's legacy. That those guys were coming from this Eastern school of Magi, of course, Magi, magic. These are, Magnuses. These are like sorcerers, wizards, astrologers, people that knew secret things,
Mm-hmm.
And there was this Eastern school of them that supposedly had it pretty much together. And they thought that school was Daniel's legacy in Babylon, that he left that because, Daniel never came home. That's where he lived his life. So anyway, moving on to the story. So every 2,100 years, it's observable. You could see it move just a tad every 70 years or so. So that's the ages, right? Every 2,100 year period, every ancient culture said that's an age. And it would have taken about 26,000 years to go around the whole circle. But each spring equinox moving one sign of the Mazzaroth to the next was considered an age. So every time you read that word in the scriptures, you're not reading like a prophetic statement about something. It's not someone going, there's an age of man, like the industrial age or the age of enlightenment. It really meant a known astronomical quantity of 2,100 years. So that, like when Peter says to Jesus, Lord, what's the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? You can't ask a question using terms you don't know, right? So his first question would have been, Lord, what's an age? Like you can't ask that question. So the man on the street was aware that the clock did these things. And of course, it's the only clock they have. We're talking it's either a sundial or the night sky. That's it. No other clocks existed, So we've got this notion that there are ages. Then if we just look to see how those ages line up with the signs and like what the correlations are, we get really fun ways that it works out. So if we just look with the biblical timeline, when Adam and Eve are expelled from the garden, the spring equinox would have started rising right at that time, astronomically speaking, in Taurus. So that would have been Taurus for like 2,100 years. Every ancient culture worshipped and venerated bulls. That's what the Taurus was, the wild ox, the bull. And so golden bulls, golden idols, the bull man, the minotaur of the labyrinth in Crete, every ancient culture, the worship of those kinds of things, the veneration of it in the Indus Valley people that became India, every ancient culture to bull, bull, bull. 2,100 years later, the clock ticks into this new age, very gradually, but it does. And right when that's happening, a man comes on the scene named Abraham. And of course, what does he find in the thicket? Instead of sacrificing his son, he finds a ram in the thicket. And it so happens that that's the sign for that age is Aries, which is a ram. And a few hundred years later, Moses takes us into a full sacrificial system of rams and lambs. 2,100 years later, Jesus comes on the scene and he keeps calling fishermen for disciples, and he finds the coin in the fish's mouth, and it's the first recorded symbol of Christianity. And that was moving us into Pisces. So again, it's right at the astronomical moment we're moving into the next age. And, we're in the transition right now of moving into the age of Aquarius, which is like a whole new sign with lots of new meaning to it. I think where this comes into our discussion, Gil, all the conversations that we've had, is that when the ages change, a whole lot of things change with them.
Yeah.
So it's not like the shifts come and go quietly. The shifts come and go with massive upheavals. And it's not like, it's so easy to think of this like church upheavals, and that's not it. Church is just something that's kind of existed for this last age of Pisces. It's upheavals between God and man. It's upheavals in how God is telling the story between himself and mankind. So when we change, like just think of this last transition between Aries and Pisces. You had this whole way of doing worship unto God, and then the age changes, and the way that what people do when they get together to worship God changes so drastically. So no one thinks that the way to worship God anymore, and I think we're all happy about this, is we don't get together and sacrifice a chicken. because that's not what we do. Like the age changed. Like we don't get together and realize, oh, who's got the doves? We need to kill some doves. That's what you're supposed to do to worship God. But that was what was considered prescribed in the Age of Aries, those kinds of things. We don't get together and go, all right, who's got the basin for hand washing? That's just not how we do things. So when the age changed, spiritual life and practice changes drastically. Who we believe God to be changes, not because God's changing, but because we're growing up. Yeah. And we sort of reach these points in our growing up that God goes, I'm going to show you more of who I am that you didn't know. So this notion that God was a dad and that God had a son and that there was this Holy Spirit, which we've identified so many times talking together as a mother. And so all these notions were so brand new. And it was so brand new that the Jews, who just understood the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to be that Elohim, Adonai, with all the names God, they rejected wholesale what the Christian movement was saying because they thought it was a different deity. They thought there's no way this is the same God that Abraham was talking about, because that's how drastic the shifts are. Mm-hmm. So spiritual life and practice changes, who we believe God to be changes. Then, of course, we get changes in our commission. There have been 3 great commissions given, one for each age. The age of Taurus had a commission that God gave Adam. The age of Aries had a commission that God gave Abraham. And the age of Pisces had a commission that Jesus gave to his followers. We are on the cusp of receiving all of these changes that we've just been discussing. We're on the cusp of receiving those changes again. So I think that's probably the big reveal, Gil, when it comes to the ages, simply because that's the moment in time that we're in, is this transition between Pisces and Aquarius, and that brings with it, these massive shifts. And I think we're all thankful it's gradual. You know that we've got centuries on either side of the shift to get used to these ideas. The transitions are astronomical transitions. Nothing happens in astronomy very fast. So we're talking hundreds of years to transition from one age to the next. When each age is 2,100 years, a couple hundred is nothing, And so that's the period of time we're in. So we're now being presented with this notion that, I don't think God has even shown us his best ideas yet.
Yeah.
He's always going to come up with better stuff, because the alternative is that we've hit a ceiling and it's all downhill from here, as opposed to God's going from glory to glory to glory. And what he gave us in Pisces was the best for that age. But what he's going to show us in Aquarius is even better than that. And what he's going to show us in the next age is even better than that. And so we're right on this cusp of maybe understanding a new commission, maybe understanding things about God we didn't know, certainly redefining spiritual life and practice, and so on. How's that for it? That was 12 minutes of
that was a meatball.
So Steve, this is the first time that you've heard all of this, at least
all
in this.
In this format, yes.
Yeah. So I want to open it up for you to ask questions, clarification questions, dig in wherever you like. Go
Great.
ahead.
Well, Chris, I have to say, I'm sure my wife's watching right now because she's a fan of yours, and so she told me how articulate you were. Her name's Nancy, and
Hello, Nancy.
She has more time since she's retired on her hands than I do right now, especially here because these guys have put me to work, so it's been awesome.
Yeah. they tend to
every
do
day,
that.
all day.
They do, yeah.
So
tell me about it.
Do you have a sense of what the Age of Aquarius? Are there clues? Are there signs already appearing that give us a sense of what this coming age is going to be like?
Yeah, that is a superb question. I think if we're just looking at the signs, we would look at that Aquarius symbol. So interestingly, each of these moments, that sign, the bull, the ram, the fish, it's in some ways defined spiritual life and practice. But just watch the trend. And actually, Gil, this is something we've never talked about, either in person or online.
Really?
But watch the trend. Yeah, I know. Let's do something new. Okay, so. I know, right? This is a big. I've oversold it. It's not going to be that impressive now. Okay, so if we watch the way that the signs for each age worked out, Taurus was very, very literal. They literally made idols of bulls.
Right.
They literally worship bulls. Aries, it's a little different. It becomes a sacrifice. They're sacrificing the ram. They're sacrificing the lamb. In the old Mazzaroths, Aries could be a ram or a lamb. Then it gets even more metaphorical when we move to Pisces, because we're not making idols of fish and no one's sacrificing fish, but Jesus is making fishers of men.
Yeah.
Now he's changed it into a metaphor. Now the sign of the age is a metaphor for something. Now let's take it another step. If we're following like the way language works, we're going from hard meaning, and then the other extreme is symbol of something. So we typically travel through metaphor to get from a literal meaning to a symbolic meaning. So almost here, you almost can see it happening. That right here, we have this sign. The Aquarius is a heavenly person. It's not an angel, but it's a human depicted with wings, like as if they're heavenly. And they're pouring out of this vessel, the Aquarius is, this pouring water out of this vessel. Now, to us, that would be a symbol of the Holy Spirit. It would be out of your bellies shall flow rivers of living water. It could also be this moment of birth, because we think of like waters breaking, like when the mother's giving birth. And oftentimes the Aquarius is a woman. It's not always a man. Okay, so there's lots of different ways this would play out, but we're getting a picture of something heavenly, perfected, like this vision of heaven and earth come together, and something being poured out on the earth, which I think we would think of in a positive light. So we might want to think about a period of time where people are putting on this heavenly reality and pouring out on the earth this, like a flood, but not in a negative sense. Like a flood of, we're going to wipe it clean again so that it can start to be rebuilt. Now, just as important as the sign of the age is what we would call, that's the ruling sign, the revelatory sign. So when again, exploring this in the heavens, I'd kind of picked up along the way that if there's a ruling sign of the age, then the revelatory sign is kind of like 180 degrees opposite. We would get it from like, if you're on the earth looking at where the sun is on the spring equinox, that's the ruling sign. But if you were to switch perspectives, as if you're going from heaven's perspective and you're standing in the sun and you're looking where the earth is on the spring equinox, that would be what's being revealed on the earth in that age. The geometry just makes it 180 degrees opposite wherever it is.
Yeah.
So when you've got Taurus here, the revelation 180 degrees opposite was the scorpion, which was the sting of death and mortality. And that was the revelation of, as soon as they fell and were out of the garden, the revelation was, oh my goodness, we can die. Like this sucks, you know? We have fallen. Okay, and then we shift, and I'm doing this like as I was looking at the clock, it probably should be reversed for all of you. So let me see if I can reverse it. So then it would go here, and this would be Aries. Am I doing this right, Gil?
Yeah.
This is how,
Yeah.
So Aries is here, but the revelation is the Libra, the scales of justice and balance. So it's the law there. So when we're in the age of Aries, which is pretty much the whole Old Testament, from Abraham to the end of the minor prophets, it's the law and God's justice and judgments that were being revealed. And then it shifts again, and it's Jesus bringing us into Pisces, and the revelation is Virgo, the bride, the wife of the Lamb, and she's carrying the sheaf of wheat, which is like the harvest, which we're all being harvested, like in this age of Pisces. And then we go here, and it's Aquarius here, but the revelatory sign is none other than Leo, the lion of the tribe of Judah. So the revelation of that age, we could think of as like the Messiah, right? The lion of the tribe of Judah has arrived. But in a general sense, the revelation would probably be true human kingship, which is what Jesus always was. Like he's not a what do people say? He's not a example for us. He's an example of us. Like he's showing us what we are, you know? So if he's the true human king, I would think the revelation of this next age is true human kingship, maybe even the beginning of this story called the dominion of man. Does that help at all? We could go on longer, but that's just kind of the nutshell version.
No, that's brilliant. I so appreciate that. When I think of water and the pouring out, that brings me to why I've been here in Sacramento and why I'm on this month-long journey around the West Coast.
You know, you're in Paris. You're in Paris right now.
I am in Paris right now.
Okay, but you were in Sacramento yesterday. Is that how this is working?
True.
Yeah.
Well, we're multi-dimensional beings. So
Well, I was on Earth yesterday, but I'm somewhere here in the Crab Nebula.
yeah,
So-
exactly.
There, how's that? Or is this better?
There we go.
No, that's good. I like that. I
But,
think
but the
that's great.
glasses are now out of place.
I
so
like my
we
Corona.
got to go back to this.
There we
Yeah,
go.
There we go.
Now we're back on the
The
Gil-
lady
guild.
said
Sorry.
Corona. We need the Mexicans.
I know, right? I'm sorry. I got us off track. You were saying you were in Sacramento in the
That's
water.
okay. We're back on the Gil Chalise right now, so this is good. So when I think of water, it makes me think of the way water flows and functions as a wave. And I've been here teaching on frequency healing and all of that. One of the things that first stirred me about this was many years ago when I too was trying my wings out, so to speak, in the heavens and spiritually exploring the Mazzaroth and all of that. I started hearing sounds, and I had no idea what I was hearing, but I was hearing a lot of sounds. And then, I listened to a YouTube audio of Louis Giglio and Star Song and how they slowed it down and it sounded like crickets, and then it sounded like angels singing and all that. Have you had any sense of revelation or understanding about the frequency of stars or star song or anything to do with frequency and this coming age, and how that frequency might be shifting around us?
Yeah, if I could, I would even love to expand that to the frequency of all nature.
Okay, good.
And you know what? Someone pointed this out to me the other day, that if there's ever a Christmas song that fits me, it's Joy to the World, because of that line, let heaven and nature sing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? It's a great line.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the part of at least the commission for the next age is that we're supposed to liberate creation. I think Paul hints at the commission for Aquarius in Romans 8 when he talks about when the sons of God are revealed. Remember, like true human kingship is revealed, it's going to free the creation from its futility. And then you've got those great verses that personify stars in the Psalms, where it says that night after night they pour forth speech, and day after day their voice is heard. And then in Job it talks about the Pleiades influencing mankind with sweetness, like as if there's a frequency coming from the Pleiades every single day. It's a frequency of sweetness itself that's coming to mankind and affecting us. And so I think tuning into that and hearing it internally, that voice, that song, that frequency, and then maybe even extending that to all nature, whether that's stars or waters or trees or the ground itself, because I think it's all coming through as voice and as song. I don't know where else to take that, except that I'm hoping that that happens more. And just personally, I think the only way that I've been doing it is like when I go outside at night and I'm looking at the moon, which I love a good crescent moon. It's my favorite phase of the moon, is the crescent phase. And I'm out there with the stars of the Pleiades and the moon, and I just start that conversation. And sometimes for me, it even comes through as poetry. So like I might hear the voice, I might hear the frequency in poetic words and sometimes in sounds, but what I suspect is that everyone's going to tune in to that in different ways. I mean, it would be tons of fun to see what it would be like if we brought all those ways together, like the actual notes with maybe the words, with what I mean, with everything else that's kind of coming through that we're getting from that frequency.
Pictures, creativity.
All of it. All of it. Yeah.
Well, and there's a lot of people out there that are starting to record more and more. Anyway, I should say, the stars, the frequency, the sounds that come from. I'm sure you've probably heard where they've taken the crickets and slowed that down and just realizing that all of nature has a sound. Even the everything has a frequency and has a sound to it. It's just having the tools
Yeah.
and instruments to actually record it, and then to slow it down, or either bring up the volume or whatever needs to happen in order to actually hear it, I think is going to be something we will see more and more of in this next age, because people are coming into that place where they're realizing we need to get back in tune with nature. So you've got AI coming on one hand, and you've got nature coming on the other. It's like, is there going to be a wonderful, beautiful mix, or a big collision?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what my theory is. It's probably more collision than mix. But I tell you, I did this in the car one day with the kids. We were driving down the road, and we were thinking about an orchestra, and we were looking out at everything around us, and we were trying to decide which parts of nature sound like the instruments of an orchestra. And so my daughter was like, "Okay, the grass has to be the strings." Because I don't know what it is when you look out at like grasses.
Yeah.
You imagine they would make a sound like a violin. Like they would make that kind of sound. And I like agreed with her. I was like, yeah, I don't know why, but I feel like even the grasshoppers in the grass would be helping with that sound. And every instrument that's ever been created, those were the original recording devices. So in other words, in the harp, you were capturing the sounds of the stars, like those little twinkling, tinkling sounds, or like in a hammer dulcimer, you were capturing star sounds. In the cello, you're capturing those deep melodies of the earth, those long frequencies, those long wavelengths. So in every instrument that was being created, that was the original recorders. They were trying to make an instrument that would play back to humans the sounds that nature was making. So I almost wonder if the way forward again is through more people playing. Like more people on a cello, more people with the flute. What are you playing with the flute? Well, you're playing the wind. Like the woodwinds. That's where we get the word, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm having a nerd moment. I feel like this is a music nerd moment, right?
You are.
I love it.
I feel like the oak trees are like a deep, bass oboe kind of a, sound. Yeah.
And as you're saying that, Bralynn, I'm thinking Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Right.
Do 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 do. I won't do the last note so we don't violate copyright.
But just that it covers such a great what do you call that, the spectrum of the music, the notes, the octaves, and that it just hits that low note, and it's like including things that it's brought with it on its journey. Anyway, the other thing that Steve was bringing up while we were here this weekend was just talking about how the crystals, obviously all of nature has some type of recording device. We know, scientifically, crystals are one of the best ways to record information on. They suspect that a crystal, if they were to record the information on it, would go and last maybe 10,000 years, that information.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is, and I think I've mentioned it here on the show before, is that 4 ounces of your DNA can record all the information that the world has to offer. Yeah. That's powerful, and that's believed that it would last, 1,000,000 years. They don't know because they can't, no one's been around long enough to test it. But that's phenomenal to think that the organic material that keeps getting passed on, which eventually in my body or, bodies that have, in the past have died, and that information has gone into the ground, but genetically it was passed on and passed on and passed on. Mm-hmm. It's just incredible to think about that. And I just wonder, what's been done in the frequency realm of DNA. Does anybody know?
Well, one of the things that we learn about with the inner healing is that there are woundings that could have happened generations ago that we're still dealing with or feeling emotionally. But the frequencies, if we come into alignment with the frequencies, that can clear that, So we talked about that a little bit, Steve, when we were doing my VST, when you were saying that there's there's an open resonance where I thought there might have been some sort of a spiritual blockage just because of some things that are going on. But you said, no, the resonant is open. So therefore we, ruled out that. But it's a tool to use in that healing process, I think.
It really is. We've seen this a lot with both the crystal bowl therapies that we're doing and then the metal bowls, what we call Himalayan bowls that are made out of bronze. And one of the things that happens when there is a blockage, or it could be a spiritual blockage, it could be an emotional thing, or it could even be a physical malady, the body will absorb the sound and it will not ring in an audible way. And it will not vibrate for very long. And so we went through this weekend with somebody during a VST, which stands for Vibrational Sound Therapy. We went through that where there was this blockage. I would hit the bowl. I would sometimes strike it twice as hard as I would normally strike it, and I just couldn't get it to ring. But I persevered with this person, and the last 2 rings rang true. And I was hitting it even lighter then, but it rang longer. And they made a comment about, wow, that was an interesting kind of thing. I think that, Chris, what you were talking about earlier about the orchestra of nature, there are things that are coming that produce sounds that will resonate us back into a place of balance and equilibrium. We call it entrainment. And one of those sounds is the sound of the roar of the lion. And so when you see the beginning of, forget which movie studio it is, but where the lion growls, he doesn't roar, he growls. But the roar of a lion is very unique. And when you were doing this motion, yes, there you go. Aside from thinking about the song Walk Like an Egyptian, I also thought of, I also thought about my friend Ron Kusmo, who taught me a number of years ago what a lion does. They are out on the Serengeti plain stalking its prey, and it will take its muzzle and put it right down on the ground. And it will begin to sound a roar, which sounds more like this. Rather than a roar. And what that low toning does is it disseminates through the grasses and through the dirt, and it disorients the prey. They don't know where the lion's standing at that point.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so when you did this, what I thought of is the lion roaring over the waters.
Nice.
Huh.
That's lovely.
So Aquarius begins to resonate and vibrate, and I don't think you can see this, but we were messing with these earlier, and because it was on the table, this is troubling the water. There's a vibration. There we go. Gil's got it singing.
Yeah.
Who's the bowl expert now? I taught him well. But that was the thing that for me when I discovered the sound of the crystal bowls specifically, and we now sell those, and we're working on training for people for those. That was the first time I heard an instrument that reminded me of those sounds that I had heard out in the heavens. Right. And now I'm finding that in all kinds of sounds. We have a friend that plays the didgeridoo.
I was just going to say didgeridoo.
And but when you layer these sounds, the way nature layers sounds, you talked about the grass and the grasshoppers. And interestingly, if you look at a blade of grass, it's got a sawtooth edge to it. So do grasshoppers' legs. And those are the things very similar to a bow that has horsehair that has little ridges just like the grass has. And you move that across strings that have little ridges, and those layers of sound produce a really great sound in the sound of a violin or a cello. We have the opportunity to layer some of these sounds, and so when my friend Gordy plays his didgeridoo into one of my bowls as I'm resonating the bowl, all bets are off. We did this a couple of weeks ago at Dr. O's church with a shofar. And it was, I'm going to use the word magical. It was just incredible what happened.
You know,
Hey,
and you
on these meetings, magical is an okay word to say. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, only here.
Good.
Yeah.
Only here. Don't do it anywhere else. You'll get in trouble.
Yeah, totally.
So we were at Nancy and Shannon's and James Bates, Shannon's husband, was talking about how they had taken one of the bowls that you'd given them, the Peniel A bowl,
Yep.
and then Miles came along. He's a flute player and
Yes.
plays the native flutes, the wooden flutes, and he began to play that into the bowl. And it is fascinating what comes out. And I just encourage people to check it out. I mean, there's probably a lot of YouTube videos, but Steve, you obviously have some things going on. You need to probably record some of this stuff that's going on so you can put it out there on your YouTube page that I'm sure you've got or getting.
We're getting one. Yeah, you're helping me play catch up. I appreciate that so much. We're launching this whole new business, Camilla Life International, around this idea that there's frequency that can make a difference in our lives, whether it's the frequency of a crystal singing bowl or a Himalayan bowl, or whether it's the frequency of a didgeridoo or a shofar, whether it's the frequency of essential oils, whether it's the frequency of a color or a light, or any number of things. And now there's this guy, he was at one of the retreats that I was invited to but didn't get to go. He has a plant band. And
Nice.
he takes these transducer microphones on these 6 different plants, and he'll play a crystal bowl in their presence and then stop playing the bowl, and they sing back resonant frequencies.
Isn't that amazing?
They respond to this. And he travels around doing these concerts with his plant band.
Yeah.
Robert Plant. Yeah.
That Robert Plant.
So where's this guy located?
I'm not sure where he lives. He
Okay.
was in Omaha, Nebraska at our retreat for the company that I represent with the Himalayan bowls, and it was just fascinating. The other thing that's cool, that this coming year their retreat is going to feature somebody from Gongs Unlimited, and they have this gong that's, I think, the largest gong on the planet right now is about 9 feet in diameter.
Wow.
And when you take a rubber mallet and you move it around the surface of the gong, it begins to sing, and it's uncanny. It sounds just like the recordings of the stars when they sing.
Wow.
It also sounds like the sound of whales. And I don't mean whales in the UK, but
Right.
whales.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe some of you have read this, and it might just be old wives' tales. But Tesla, when he had discovered the frequency of the Earth, and I think it was he that discovered the frequency of the
You're
Earth.
right. Yeah.
But he was trying to figure out a way to resonate that frequency, and I don't remember all the details of it. But all I remember is that there was a concern because he had created a frequency and again, this might just be a story, but he had created a frequency in the building that he was working in that began to shake the entire building. He found the frequency of the building, started to shake the entire building, even broke out some windows, had the police running up the stairs when he finally stopped, and he apparently didn't even know what was going on. So if that frequency meeting, just like meeting the frequency of this glass, if you meet it hard enough and loud enough, it will break.
Yeah.
Well, the building was breaking.
Yeah.
And if you meet the frequency of the Earth,
You might break the Earth.
that was the concern. And I don't know to what level that concern was at, but I know there was some people that were freaking out, just like dropping the nuclear bomb. People didn't know, is that going to create a nuclear reaction that would just keep going and going and going and destroy everything. So anyway, anybody got anything to say on that, or have you heard that?
I've heard... I just remember that Nancy Cohen told us that we couldn't practice the Merkaba too much because we might collapse the hotel around us. So
I think that there's a lot of evidence out there. If you look at the Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapse that happened a number of years ago, they say that was because the wind was blowing across the connecting cables and resonating them at the frequency with which the platform of the bridge was operating, and it vibrated itself. So you can take things and vibrate them out of phase, and then it can cause some problems. Just like you can break a wine glass. We've had several very expensive bowls break by overstimulating them, overplaying them. And you look at the old opera singers that could break glass, and that was proven on Mythbusters to be true, that you could
Oh, yeah.
actually do that.
Yeah, in fact, you can go to YouTube and just type it in, you look it up, and there's kids that are breaking it. There's actually a strategy now that they've got to where a lot of people are able to break glasses. So it is just meeting that frequency.
Yeah, it is.
And you get it vibrating hard enough and it'll break.
Isn't it true that like heavy equipment or something that has a low rumble is really disruptive to your internal organs? I heard that because I was, in construction for so long. So I would imagine, and I also read one, probably a Michael Crichton book that was talking about they created cavitation just by vibrating very low, and so they could collapse things that way as a weapon. Like, that's pretty frightening.
My Didge player has a cavitation device that's used in construction for settling concrete. So you don't want bubbles in concrete.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you look at some of this stuff, to bring it back to what Chris was talking about earlier, that when these vibrations are happening, they bring shifts. And so we now know that the Schumann Resonance, which is the frequency that the Earth operates at, it's not a fixed frequency. I believe there's an app that you can get for your phone that reads out to you moment by moment what the frequency of the Earth is, and it's been constantly changing, but it stays within a range until recently, and I don't know what recently is, but it's now almost doubled in terms of its frequency, the Schumann frequency. So that tells us something's shifting.
That's interesting, which I don't want to go down that road on this show, but the Earth's axis and all of that. I mean, that's shifting. It's like the cosmic shift, man. I don't know what you did, Chris, but you just really
started it.
You revealed it, and now everybody's aware of it, and it's just on its way.
That's how those things work. Yeah.
It is very fascinating, though. I just I can't get over the fact that there are so many things. I mean, I don't put a lot of stock into any one thing specifically. And a lot of them, I feel like we can say, well, what we thought it was, we were wrong about. But it seems like there might have been something. Just, and I know, Chris, you kind of poo-poo these things, and you're fine doing that. But, the blood moons and all that showed up that kind of hit one after the other. You've got that. You've got the cosmic shift. You've got the decade of Ion, followed by the decade of Pei. And I know you've said this, and I know it's true, that these are in some ways man-made things, but at the same time, did God, because this is now using your thought process, that if we are part of the divine, and even though we may have created some of these things, if we were doing them in participation with the divine, maybe it was something that was coming from Father, from Yahweh, that created the Hebrew calendar, or some of these other things that now seem that Father will use anything, like Christmas. He will use things to draw people toward him and to show the signs in the skies, or the signs period, that he's doing something and he is shifting something. There's just a convergence of so many things that I do believe we need to be waking up and paying attention, and at least just asking, okay, God, what are you doing? What's going on?
Yeah.
I just had a thought. Steve, you had mentioned that if you have two grandfather clocks, a big one and a small one, they will come into harmony with the swinging of the pendulum based on the larger or the stronger frequency. So when we're going out, Chris, and hugging our trees and doing our things, are we the dominant frequency when we want to bring joy to the trees? Or is the tree the dominant frequency because it's been here hundreds of years? And who am I?
Well, I think that's, that question goes back to prior to the scientific revolution, nature is the dominant force.
Okay.
Post-scientific revolution, man is the dominant force. Okay. Going forward, there shouldn't be a dominant force.
That's good. I like that. Harmony.
Yeah.
Harmony.
Things should be working in concert.
I like that.
So the idea is to find out where does my frequency meet the frequency of the things around me. How do they then work together to create and to change? And as opposed to one being the thing that takes over the other. When it comes to humans and their relationship with nature, I think.
I love that. I love that. I think about my friend Arthur Burke and his comment that he usually says when we get into these kind of discussions, he'll say, "Okay, now we need to ask the question, so what?
Yeah.
Like what does this mean on Tuesday morning when we wake up, or Monday morning when we wake up? What does this mean for us?" And I know for me, my foray into frequency has taken me down the pathway of using frequency healing, whether it's playing my guitar, playing a keyboard, playing MIDI devices, playing a flute, playing drums or percussion, and now with crystal singing bowls and the brass bowls that we're playing for healing. That's where I'm going. But I'm curious whether you have an answer to the question, so what? So what you described earlier, and with this shift coming, how does that involve us as a former dominant frequency, but now a need to be harmonious? Can you comment about that?
Yeah, as much as I can. I think the ages never seem to change without human involvement. So there's always a component there where God's always using his people to actually, I think of them like cosmic doors, right? Like one cosmic door is coming to a close while the other cosmic door is opening up. But it's human involvement that seems to be in the mix, whether it's Abraham showing us the way in or Jesus showing us the way into Pisces. So in those transitions, it's almost like people feel that, and it's in their activity that they're actually moving things forward. Now, I think for us, the big why, like the big so what, is that to move into that next age where we're experiencing true human kingship, it's like a kingship over what exactly? And it's not a kingship over each other. It's not humans ruling humans. It's not a case of lording it over each other, but it really is like, again, that Romans 8 of being in the original position of having dominion in nature. And so for me, it's a case of you can't rule what you don't know. So, because you can dictate to what you don't know, and you can bully what you don't know. You can overpower what you don't know, but you can't rule and demonstrate kingship the way that Jesus really demonstrates kingship if you don't know what it is that you're ruling on that very intimate relational level. And so for me to step into that next age is to find in nature that voice, that frequency, if you will, Steve, all of that voice that's there, so that I can first get to know it as a human being that's not trying to dominate it, but just as someone that's going, I want to understand you, and I want to know you as intimately and as well as the Father does, because I have a feeling that if I can be relational as my Father is relational, then that's the way I'm going to step into true human kingship, which will one day allow me to create and change. And in other words, to do the calling that we've always kind of had, which is to make this place here like we see the heavens up there, like to bring the order of heaven into this world of incarnation and to see it become the garden. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that'll happen without that really intimate relationship. So I think that's so good, like that kind of like, okay, what does it mean? Like what, so knowing the transition and knowing the frequencies and knowing how all that works, what does it do for me? And that's what it comes back to for me, is to know the frequencies is to know the voice of nature. To know that voice of nature is going to provide me with a chance for relationship. If I can relate, then I can step into kingship, which is I'm going to rule only what I know. The only thing that's going to respond to me and meet me halfway are the things that can feel I genuinely love you, I'm genuinely for you, and I'm not going to use you. Like if I'm going to be a king like Jesus is a king, I'm in it for the betterment of all of those things around me. And if that's nature, then I've got to be in it for the betterment of nature. And then I think nature will start to go, man, that guy hears our voice. Like that, I think he knows us. He can hear our sound. People haven't been hearing our sound forever. Like I think he speaks our language, and then all of a sudden then our words may not just fall to the ground. They may be the kind of words that can move a mountain. you know?
I love that, Chris.
You'd have to know how to speak mountain.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, one of the things that I think is happening, and I want to believe that this is happening, is as we are becoming aware of the frequencies, and that we are coming into communion with nature, with everything around us, and discovering the oneness of everything. That, Chris, you've said this, that I like your analogy of the attending, that God gave everything away and allowed everything that he gave away to then attend to him. And that as we are moving forward, it's like we've gone through this, scientific revolution and all this, where man has kind of stepped up and gone from dependence to independence. I am who I am, and I'm going to do what I want to do, versus moving into interdependence with all of nature, to where as we're moving into this, that we stop bullying everything. I like that idea as well. We stop bullying everything, and we begin to walk in harmony with everything. So this is just an interesting little analogy or story that I was at the gym this morning or yesterday morning, and as I'm there, I got aches and pains here or there, joint pains. It wasn't nothing major, but I'm just thinking, you know what? I'm going to expand my spirit and see if I can start getting energy from some of these people that got good knees and all that. And there's like, no. In fact, draw back and let their spirits attend to me. Those who have good knees, those who have good joints, those who have good genetics, let them attend to me, so that I'm not going out and taking it, but rather I'm letting it. Now, some may think, well, then you may let in all the demonics. Like, no, I'm the light.
Right.
Well,
no
and
fear.
You should be,
No fear.
Expand your spirit to bless them with the parts of you.
Yeah, see, it's an interchange.
People typically have an optimistic attitude. So if I could just spread that, even if my body feels that, if I could spread what I have, I always think, Moses, what's that in your hands? Like, what do you have to spread and to give to others and to, move
it's
the
an
kingdom
interchange.
forward.
It's that living in harmony together with everything, because we all do have something to give, and we all can receive something. It's when we get arrogant, thinking, well, I've got all there is to give, and everybody's got to listen to me and take what I've got, versus listening and receiving as well. That interchange. So we all got a long ways to go.
We do. Well, Steve, I've got to tell you, I've got something on a bucket list, and maybe you can help me with this. So, one day, I wanna get a group together, and I just want them to play these instruments. I'd like to have someone on a didgeridoo, preferably Aboriginal, but I will take anybody, right?
I can.
Well, I don't know, Bralynn. I don't know. Let's just wait. Just wait and let me finish.
We want a didgeridoo, okay? Not a didgeridoo. No, never mind.
So here we go. So I'd like to have someone playing a didgeridoo. Then I'd like to have, if possible, a Native American playing one of their big mother drums. Those big wide ones that they're just okay. Check, good. Then I would like to have, someone doing one of the bowls, their choice. I don't know the difference between them or what they're made of, but I trust someone.
I've got a 24-inch bowl.
Okay, that we're doing
24 inches. Look at you, must be a fisherman. 24 inches.
It is. It's a 24-inch bowl.
24 inches is this.
Well, the screen makes it look like this, so.
Right. So for the viewers at home,
he did say he was a fisherman.
I am a fisherman.
So all right. So you have didgeridoo. You've got Native American drum. You've got bowl, and then I'll take anything like an Irish penny whistle or anything like that in that vein.
Kazoo?
No, not a kazoo. Not a kazoo. Hang on,
For you,
Bralynn.
yes, Bralynn.
Hang on. We'll get you in here somewhere, okay? We'll let you play the triangle or the cowbell.
More cowbell. We need more cowbell.
Sometimes you need more cowbell. So,
Right.
all right. So, and then at the end, you've got all those instruments, which I know don't traditionally go together. And then I would like to have one singer singing an aria above it all in Gaelic. That's my bucket list right there. If those people would get together and make some music, I might explode. I could explode
And,
into confetti. I would go home like Elijah.
What about
And
Bobby
I-
McFerrin? Shouldn't he be in there somewhere?
Probably, yes.
and
Probably.
I can see you, Chris. You're drinking Irish whiskey and eating hard cheese, right? During this concert.
Those things don't go that well together, but I would just sit back and then be like, all right, Jesus, you can take me home. I'm good. I've done what I came here to do. So.
Well, Chris, I can tell you this: we started a ministry group years ago at the old St. Luke's Episcopal Church, where the Charismatic Renewal started in the '60s with Father Dennis Bennett, and our good friends John and Holly Rodham, he was the rector there at the time, opened the church to us to start something that we called the Circle of Worship, and this came out of a vision that I had of cows standing around in a field, and then they all got into a circle, stood up on their hind legs, and put their front hooves together, and were clapping in a circle. And the Lord said, "I want you,
Python, right?
yeah, I want you to gather some saints together and worship me." And I said, "What do we call it?" And he said, "The Circle of Worship."
Yeah.
And so it took some Russian friends of mine to define that as cow. And I couldn't understand that because they said, well, it's the vision, but it's cow, circle of worship. And I went, oh, of course.
Right.
So we did that. We had a didge.
Yeah.
It wasn't an Aboriginal, but it's somebody that for years worked over on the mission field with Heidi Baker and her husband Roland. And so my friend Gordy may be watching this. Gordy taught himself the didge, and we had him actually blow his didge into the heart of a man who was having heart trouble for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And this guy got healed as a result of that.
Yeah,
So but I also have a friend in Australia who is an Aboriginal master didge player that I'm sure we could reach out to. The drum, we found a drum in New Mexico in a museum, and it is one of the large tribal drums that warriors used. It was not played as a community drum like the pancake. It was played sideways, but you could use it the other way too. But this particular museum thrift store was using it as a table to display cowboy boots. And that kind of incensed me, so I flung all the boots off and I bought that drum. So that's sitting in my music room at home. And
Nice.
we've done some amazing things. We took it up with us. It was made by Red Shirt, who was a Navajo up in Taos, of a single piece of white willow bark tree. So we have the drum, and I've got lots of tribal friends that could do something with that. You mentioned something Celtic, and I think the Uilleann pipe, if I'm pronouncing that correct, is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
My nephew plays that instrument. And then what was the other instrument?
The bowls.
Yeah, the
It'd be
bowls,
nice
of course.
to have the bowls.
I might
And
know
then-
somebody that knows some things about how to play that.
But didn't you train Gil?
I did.
I
We'll have
posted
him
that
bring his
picture,
glass.
right?
Yeah.
Gotta try it again.
And then as far as the only other thing that we've never done, there we go. The only thing that we've never done is have somebody singing in Gaelic an aria, but we have had people go into ecstatic singing, and that's great. And then my wife does this thing called the cry, where she just lets out a tone, and it goes and goes and goes and goes, and eventually somebody shouts out, "Breathe, woman, breathe." So, but a lot of healing takes place. So I would love to put that together. Are you wanting to be there live, or do you want to just hear it over the internet?
No, I think this has to be done live.
Okay.
Well, but it does have to be done on Kingdom Talks.
Yes.
I
So
agree.
live for you, live for the people gathered, but has to be on Kingdom Talks.
So will this be a first? Will this be the first time that we serve Irish whiskey on Kingdom Talks?
No.
With cheese.
Oh.
I'm
With-
for this.
with hard
I
cheese?
think I'm for this, totally.
Well, if we could just get the waiter to show up and get us some.
Man,
They bailed on
service
us.
this place, man. Yeah, no, I honestly that would be all of my dreams come true. I mean, like, it would just.
All right, we will do it. I promise
Yeah.
you, we will do this.
Great.
Awesome.
But not on my cruise because Steve has vertigo, so we can't. Maybe on one of the ports.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, we're out of time for the
Oh,
main
okay.
show.
Well, just one more thing before I go. I have to give a shout out to Peta Condon because she has some amazing. Do you know who she is, Chris? Because she loves you. Okay, and I think we need to.
Friends.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. We need to get the two of you guys on because she was talking about the oneness of creation and the restoration of our relationships and those kinds of things too.
Yes.
So, yeah, that would be really cool.
Well, hey, am I allowed to plug something that's totally free?
Yeah, actually do that. Do that, please.
Okay. Can I wait? I want to get my Zoom link for this call that I'm about to do in a little over a week. Can I go retrieve it really quickly and put it in the chat here while you guys talk for like a minute? Is that okay?
Yeah, Bralynn, why don't you wrap us up? And and there were some questions that came through. I wish we had time to get to them. So, Chris, go ahead and do what you need to do there. But
okay, well, I can talk while I do this. I'm going to pull it up right now.
Okay.
And on December the 19th, which is not this coming Thursday night, but the following. Say that again.
10 days.
10 days. I am going to do a Zoom call that's just going to be open to everyone. And it's all going to be about celebrating Christmas in the heavenly places.
Well,
right.
Hey, you know what? We're doing a special show tomorrow, Chris. I wish you could be there. I think we said 4 o'clock, and I wanted to invite you because the Next Agers are going to get together tomorrow at 4 o'clock Pacific time to have a conversation about Christmas.
Oh, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. So here, I just put it in the chat box, Gil. Do you have people that can put that in the thingy? Like in this?
I don't see it in the chat box.
I don't see it in the chat.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Put it in our chat box. That would help.
Hold on. I'm trying to figure it out. Hold on. Do I have to press send or something?
No.
Just return.
Just make sure you have it in chat.
Okay, hold on. I'm pretty sure I did.
The little bubble at the bottom.
I think you hit the cosmic shift button.
I think I just did it.
There you
did it.
did
You just did it.
I just did it. Okay, so there you go. If you can put that in the stream, this is what this is.
Okay.
It's going to be like a Zoom call. It's open to everyone. My Zoom account can hold 100 people. And so there are groups of people that are watching together to make sure we don't get close to that number. I can't imagine us getting close to 100, but other people said we might. Bottom line is whoever's on there is on there. And it's going to like 10 or 15 minutes of me just talking about Christmas as experienced from someone from that next age perspective, where you're understanding the winter solstice, you're seeing the changes in times and seasons, why these old traditions of Saturnalia and Yule are, again, they're coming from a righteous real, that those old Saturnalia Yule festivals were pagan, but they're coming from a righteous real about the winter solstice. So 10 or 15 minutes of me talking about that. And then we're just going to go into the heavens and celebrate Christmas together. And I love doing it every year at this time. And I just wanted to just open it up and say, if you want to come. So
that's exciting. I put it in Facebook, and as soon as the YouTube is up or available for me to do it, I'll put it over there as well.
Yeah, by the way, for anybody watching on this side, glad you're on Facebook. YouTube didn't go live for some reason, so we'll have to upload it later. So we've been having tech issues.
Right. That was my plug.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
You did awesome. I'm excited to hear about that.
Yeah,
so,
it should be fun.
Actually, somebody mentioned something about attending. When I mentioned the attending, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that in the behind the scenes. So you got a few more minutes?
I do.
Okay, so I'm going to end this portion because we're going to have to do it separately.
Sure.
So, Bralynn, do you want to wrap us up?
Sure. Thank you so much for watching Kingdom Talk. We really appreciate you. And always, we have a great time with Chris as one of our featured guests. He's on quite often when we love you, Chris. And thank you, Steve, for joining us as well. That was a great, lively conversation that we had. We hope we all freaked you out, our FREQ.
Frequency.
Got it? Okay, yeah, freaked you out with all of this conversation.
Oh,
I know, right? Gil told me to wrap it up. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to our members. We appreciate your support. And if you haven't become a member yet, go to kingdomtalksmedia.com and click the member button, and we'll see you over on the other side for all of the behind the scenes good stuff. All right, there you go.
All right, sounds good. Thank you all. We love you all, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.